Hey guys, how's it going today? Hope you're doing well. Let me just go ahead and do that sound check really quick. Hello, sound check 1, 2, 3. You do these two. It's looking fuzzy even on the camera. Yeah, perfect. It's working. Nice. Thanks, guys, for being here. Hope you're doing well today. Switching it up a bit. So earlier today we read the Loving Parent Guidebook. Now we're doing something completely different. And we're going back to this dark psychology and manipulation. So we read one section. I think I only did one recorded reading of this anyway. And when we were reading through the Loving Parent Guidebook reading that we chose for today, it really brought this book to my mind because they were talking about it, responding to your needs, I think was that section. What is it called? And they were talking about how you have to be able to influence your environment to able to get your needs met. Let's see if I can find that section because I still have this book here over. Oh yeah, connecting to your needs. Yeah. As with feelings, we often learn from our dysfunctional families to ignore, downplay, or feel ashamed about our needs. This leaves us without the skills or vocabulary to talk about them. Yeah, it's not just talking about them. That was not even the. Oh, yeah. Here was the section that I wanted to read that made me bring this out. I even put in a little bracket next to it, the one at the bottom. And I don't know if that was fast enough for you to catch that on the screen. In any case, this is on page 108 of chapter 10. And the section that made me think to pull this book out was learning that our feelings come from our needs can help us become actors who find ways to meet our needs rather than actors who judge and blame ourselves and others when our needs aren't met. And so voila, here we go. How to get your fucking needs met. I mean, it's crazy that we actually have to spend time to learn these things because this is how most people in this society are living, especially in these dark days when things are getting chaotic. And I'm not saying that this is the only tool that you use to, get your needs met. But if you don't have the skills of manipulation and influence, you're never going to be able to take care of yourself, to keep yourself safe, to get your needs met, to be treated with respect, to maintain your sanity, to maintain your physical health. You will never be able to guard yourself against manipulation unless you are aware of these tactics. And unfortunately, many of us grew up being manipulated by our parents as opposed to being guided and supported to be manipulative. Or not manipulative, but to be able to have the capacity to influence our environment to get our needs met because we were born as objects, extension of our parents to meet their needs, perhaps, for example. And so they wouldn't give you that knowledge. And so that's why we're here today, so you can learn to protect yourself and also how to operate interpersonally so that you can get your needs met and stop being walked all over and treated like shit because we're all done with that. Okay, so chapter 2. We're starting here. This is called The Weapons of Influence. Okay. So the 6+1 Weapons of Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. Cialdini. I think maybe it's Robert Cialdini. It looks like a little bit of Italian name. I don't know. Is an international expert in the field of persuasion, conditioning, and negotiation. He is a professor of psychology at the Arizona State University. The most important book, written in 1984, influenced the psychology of persuasion. This book is an exhaustive collection of studies, tests, experiments, and theories. Many researchers who want to explain how and why you end up saying yes. People are surrounded by stimuli that increase more and more every day. That's why your brain reduces fatigue, reduces the fatigue of the activity decision-making to simplify simplification mechanisms. Without the instinct, we'll succumb to informational overload. So we use mental shortcuts, which are cognitive biases. Today, the evolution of technology is very fast. Our natural ability to process information looks increasingly insufficient to handle the overload of challenges, choices, and novelties of modern life. We have created our own inadequacy by building a world of radically greater complexity. But why talk about these topics? Because our choices are 95% based on unconscious level decision making. Let's see in detail the 6+1 universal rules of persuasion discovered by Robert Cialdini and the respective psychological mechanisms of mental influence that underlie them. The first one is reciprocity. According to the reciprocity rule, if a person receives a gift, a concession, or a favor, which he receives as a spontaneous or disinterested, but he feels obliged to give something back. I'm struggling with that today. I'm going to reread that first paragraph. According to the reciprocity rule, if a person receives a gift, a concession, or a favor, which he perceives as spontaneous or disinterested, he feels obliged to give something back. This psycho technique is based on the fact that we feel instinctively inclined to reciprocate what a person has given us or the favor we have received, just as we have been educated from an early age by our society. A strategy of persuasion that exploits this principle is the tasting technique. At the supermarket, they invite you to taste a product so that when you feel you have received a gift, you almost feel obliged to return it, and the purchase of the package is almost guaranteed. Or think of street stalkers, those who ask for alms with various excuses and pretend to give you a small item and even put it in your hands as a flower. If you notice, as soon as you take it, they start asking you for money. Remember that you often return the gifts you receive unfairly, that is, by exceeding their value, because psychologically you want to repay them in a dignified way. This mental trap is often exploited by those who want to manipulate us. How to avoid falling into this trap, again, which is why this reading is so important. It's not that I'm trying to teach you the bad things, it's I'm trying to teach you how to protect yourself. First of all, to be aware of all of these different patterns, because most of us are not. And then how to set up the correct defenses and self-protection mechanisms, because again, most of us are not aware of that either, because we were not parented sufficiently. But that's why I'm here, guys, so don't worry. Something on my pants. That's my favorite pants, anyway. How to avoid falling into the trap of the reciprocity rule. If a person makes a favor, don't feel obliged to return it. If he does it with his heart, he should not want anything in return. But if he does want something back, avoid falling into it. In fact, it's good to avoid accepting those gift offers that you. In fact, it's good to avoid accepting those gifts or those offers that give you suspicion they're oriented towards a profit. So if you have an impression that whoever is gifting you a gift is not a benefactor, but a taker, you can easily refuse the gift. Oh, excuse me, with assertive communication. Also, when someone gives you a positive identity, they sometimes will make it to manipulate you. If, for example, a person says to you, you who are a smart person will surely approve. Don't fall for the trap. He might do it to push you, to act in line with the image he's given you. And you, who are a smart person, certainly won't fall for it. The second one is scarcity. Ooh, there you go. The second is scarcity. So we're going on to that. The rule of scarcity is the mental concept whereby we tend to attach greater value to objects we think we might run out of. That includes items we believe are rare and uncommon. According to this principle, the more something is scarce, the more it is desired. It is the assumption that underlies this collecting. Excuse me, guys. Marketing experts know that a product becomes more attractive when its availability is limited. There are two strategies to create scarcity at scale. Number one, create a time restriction. To create a time restriction of the special offer. For example, offer valid until tomorrow night, or offer valid only for a few days. Use the product limitation. Limit the special offer only to a certain number of items or to the first 20 calls, for example. This is what happens on travel sites like Booking when they're trying to book a room for a hotel and a pop-up says only 3 rooms left. Also, this is what happens when this is what happens on airline websites when they are trying to buy tickets and a pop-up appears says last 5 seats available. The rule of scarcity acts deep in the consumer's psyche because it leverages his fear of losing the product or the opportunity to save his money if he does not act quickly. How to defend against the scarcity rule. When an opportunity is limited in time, this does not mean that it has to be precious and to be seized at once. Evaluate if you really need that product or that information, and don't let your instinct advise you. Number 3 is social proof. There you go. This is on page, now we're on page 34. Oh, excuse me, guys. Tired today. On average, when people are confused or in a situation with a lack of information, they tend to consider the behavior and choice made by a large number of people to be more valid. This rule exploits the cognitive bandwagon bias. It's a little bit like what happens when you get off the subway, not knowing which direction we have to go to find the exit. We instinctively follow the people believing that they know the right path. If I had to buy a product on the internet, I will not only choose the one with the best reviews, but I'll go for the one with the most ratings. This is what happens on TripAdvisor with the reviews and opinions that customers give about the restaurants or hotels that they have gone to. The same occurs for the number of likes on the Facebook page, because the high number of likes gives the idea that people like it. Or try to think about the high number of views on the video on YouTube. In practice, the mechanism works like this. If interest or behavior is widespread among people, it will automatically appear more interesting and attractive for us too. If you think about it, fashions works exactly like this. This stratagem is used in political elections with polling data. If those say that a certain political party is successful among the people, I will have a feeling that it's worth voting for as well. This technique is also used in marketing. When you see a line of people outside a store, you feel more like going in because you ask yourself, what on earth will be in there? I'm going in there too. Usually, in the disco, they keep people outside to create a queue effect, even if there's nobody in the club. On the contrary, when you walk into a restaurant and realize there's no other customer, you will leave. I've done it before. It happens because in cases like this, we are led to think that there is something wrong. And when we have a doubt, we always go away. How to avoid falling in the trap of the rule of social proof. Try not to fall in this trap of, if many people think so, it must be right. If, for example, they recommend a restaurant, a movie, or a book, the one preferred by more people is not always the best. Okay. Liking is the next. As a rule, we tend to like people, attractive people. This is a typo in here, I think. As a rule, we tend to like people, attractive people in general, and those similar to us in clothing, interests, and opinions, hobbies, etc. For this reason, we are more inclined to follow them and accept their offers. This rule exploits the cognitive bias of the halo effect. By working on building a bond of sympathy and similarity between persuader and victim, it is easier to achieve results than a change of attitude. This pleasantness can involve many other features. It can be physical attractiveness, sympathy, familiarity, a form of kindness, and all characteristics that make a person pleasant. How can it be created? By identifying the points in common with the interlocutor, deepening on them, bringing them to the foreground, and then leveraging them. It is a confirmation technique. In practice, one does nothing but reflect the other. To build a bond of sympathy, we can make appreciations. It is quite natural that I have more sympathy for those who compliment me, who esteem me, or who love me in general. To build a bond of similarity, we can bring out one or more features in common. Similarly, mutual persuaders, if I tell If if you tell him, for example, I'm from New York, and if he can't tell you he's from New York, he'll say, I visited there last year. It's a beautiful city, and I'd like to live there. In this way, he'll immediately appear more sympathetic, and you'll tend to follow him. The rule of sympathy and pleasantness is the identification mechanism that lies at the basis of what is called influencer or testimonial, who is known as a person who recommends openly or directly a certain product, praising its qualities. Typically, he uses a various social media, publishing photos with a certain items to influence his followers to buy it, creating a process of identification. How to defend yourself from the liking rule and pleasantness. If someone you've just met sells you a product or service and you realize you like it too much compared to others, it turns on a wake up call. To do this, try to separate the product or service from the person proposing it. Objectively assess what he or she is proposing. Take some time to evaluate the purchase calmly without the presence of the person who might influence you. Number 5 is authority. In general, we have a sense of deference to authority. So we tend to obey orders given by a person in uniform or follow advice given by an authoritative person in a particular field. This is why marketing, this is why in marketing, we use dentist and toothpaste or toothbrush commercials, chefs to recommend a kitchen brand, or sportsmen and women to advertise products for those who practice. A recent example of a company that has turned its fortune around through an important figure is Herbalife with Cristiano Ronaldo. In order to appear authoritative, a persuader could adopt a decisive attitude and a posture that imposes itself. This is an interesting one. So I think this is also speaking to how coming off arrogant, even talking down to people, looking down to people, like, they say pay attention to how people treat the staff at the restaurant or something. Like, people who do that, they're also giving off a certain image or a certain perspective to other people about how they are. They're actually communicating something to others. And some people might say, oh, that's wrong, we should respect all people, but those people see it as a power move to express and demonstrate and display their power, which then is responded to or reacted to by other people. The person who was choosing that aggressive action, I guess you could say, then observes the action and internalizes the response as I am powerful. So yeah, it's not the ethical, moral thing to do, but this is why people do it. Um, he could display his diplomas or academic titles on his wall of office, conveying an idea of authoritativeness. All the more so if, for example, he wears a uniform. Oh, sorry, guys. I think I'm going to finish this last end of this section and then close that up. I've always been struck by the fact that two different lawyers, separate from each other, told me that they could not wear a shirt worth less than $100 because otherwise they would lose clients. They believe that, indirectly, wearing that shirt testifies to their professional status. How to defend yourself from the rule of authority. When an idea or behavior is suggested to you by someone of authority, it does not mean either that it has to be the right one, nor has to be the wrong one. Let me give you the advice of an expert on the subject. Number 6, and there's 6 plus 1, so there's only one more left. Commitment and consistency. Oof, gosh, there we go. Commitment and consistency. The rule of commitment and consistency is based on the fact that people tend to be consistent with what has been said or done before. We are all instinctively inclined to take on positions in general because we give a vague opinion about something. But once we have committed ourselves, especially if we have done it in front of more than one person, we tend to automatically maintain it. It is as if something inside our minds makes us do so. This happens because psychologically, we need to feel and appear consistent with the choices we've made previously. The rule of commitment and coherence is much more effective if commitment is made and, besides being said, is also written. At the same time, if what is said and written is also made public, the technique becomes extremely powerful. That gives me a lot of things to think about. The mechanism of this persuasion technique consists in making the person express a general judgment on anything and then immediately attach a request to it. A strategy used on the streets by those who want money is to ask the first passerby questions like, "Excuse me, do you have something against drug addicts?" The average person will answer no. Then they will be invited to sign in favor of, for example, a popular petition to promote the social reintegration of drug addicts. Next, they will be asked for a small donation in support of the initiative he signed just a few seconds earlier. The secret lies in using an argument the interlocutor will certainly agree. For example, are you in favor of saving poor children who are dying from hunger? Or are you in favor of protecting the environment and avoiding pollution of the planet? The answers to these questions will, on average, always be in favor. So the trap of commitment and consistency with the demand for money to support the initiative will be set. The passerby is therefore likely to agree and give the offer to be consistent with what is said just now, with what with what was said just now. This technique works even better if the person you want to persuade responds publicly in front of several people or in the presence of a friend. In order not to make a bad impression, they will try to be consistent with what they have said until the end. Another way to exploit this rule consists of a manipulative technique called foot in the door, which aims to create a contract with the interlocutor, a small glimmer, and then gradually make him accept something more challenging. A typical example of foot in the door is the pitfall technique, or or asterisk. It is an offer at a very low price with an asterisk next to it. For example, you imagine you seeing a sign in the window of a travel agency saying flight to and from Miami for $79 with an asterisk. Attracted by the offer, we decided to enter and asked to buy the ticket. But when we read what the asterisk indicated in smaller text, we discovered that the offer is only valid under certain conditions and does not include taxes, etc. So the total cost of the ticket is actually $197. In these cases, it's very likely that ever since we entered the office and expressed our interest in buying a ticket, we finally decided to pay the much higher amount, all just because of consistency. How to defend ourselves from the rule of commitment and consistency. Countering the rule of commitment and consistency is very difficult. And to say no, you have to be very, very aware of what is happening. Consistency is the element that makes us decide automatically, allowing us in most cases to make the right decision quickly. To avoid being a victim of this kind of manipulation, therefore, it is necessary to be aware of the processes behind this principle to understand what you can get out of this trap, how to get out of this trap anytime you want. If, for example, a decision is no longer optimal for us, no matter how much energy we have spent on to achieve the goal, it will probably be more advantageous of it to let it go. If, on the other hand, you realize you are a victim of this kind of manipulation, you can use appropriate assertive communication to tell the person you are interacting with that you will no longer fall into this type of trap and be manipulated. After the fear of scarcity, the praise for sympathy and deference for authority, and the power of reciprocity and consistency, I will deal with the last rule of persuasion, as stated by Robert Cialdini. The last one, they said 6 plus 1, is, I don't know why they call it just plus 1 and not all of them. It's called the unity or units, the community effect. The seventh rule is a rule developed by Robert Cialdini. Later, precisely in 2016, in his book Persuasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade. The idea that by sharing an identity with someone else, one is then more inclined to accept his requests. This rule exploits the cognitive bias of in-group. Communicators who can identify units will be able to get positive responses to their proposals and recommendations. A tool used to study and exploit The units are certainly the Facebook groups, capable of triggering a sense of belonging, such that commercial proposals are not only accepted but desired. Among many, one of the most striking examples is certainly the Apple that gathers a group of people who identify with the values of the product, makes them similar to each other, and has even managed to make them the same group of individuals also have a common enemy embodied in Android users. Groupthink or group thinking has been the subject of many experiments that have shown how individuals are strongly influenced by group opinions, perceptions, and behaviors. Solomon Asch, a Polish social scientist, demonstrated its validity in 1956 through one of his experiments. This consisted of including some subjects in a small group. They were shown 3 lines of very different lengths. They were asked to indicate which of these 3 lines corresponded to, for example, 1 meter. The other members of the group, accomplices to the experimenter, unanimously gave an obviously wrong answer. Well, 33% of the subjects let themselves be conditioned by this answer and indicated the clearly wrong length. And the attitude socially accepted by the group, even if wrong, is that it is normal to wait for months to collect the salary. For a great number of subjects will let themselves be conditioned by such an answer. How to defend yourself from the unity rule. Contrasting the rule of unity is very difficult because belonging to a community in which we reflect and identify ourselves conditions us both in ideas and especially in purchasing choices. Therefore, to avoid being a victim of this type of manipulation, it is necessary to be aware of the processes underlying this rule in order to understand that it is possible to get out of this trap at any desired time. For example, a product or service is not suitable for us either because of the quality or the cost. It will be more advantageous for us not to buy it. Thank you. And that is the end of this chapter 2. So that was quite a doozy, but we really talked about some of these. This chapter. Damn, I didn't realize I read that much. Wow. How much time has gone by? I didn't even pay attention. I was just reading. They changed the layout of this YouTube live, by the way, because the button used to be at the bottom. So some things have changed since I last did that. Anyway, we're on chapter 2, and this chapter is about like the 6+1 weapons of influence. So I feel like these are some tools. They're not the only ones, I'm pretty sure, because we'll have some other tactics in here. But these are kind of like the basis of how to influence people, right? And it's very, very, very important for us to gain a better understanding again. So he said that we can begin to protect ourselves from this manipulation, because if you grew up, if you grew up in this environment, you're not going to be able to really protect yourself. You're not going to be able to know how to stand up or defend yourself. I'm just looking through these through this book. It's quite long. There's so much information here. Wow, this is a lot. And so this book is going to be very interesting. Yeah, they have a lot. Wow, I haven't finished this book, but there's so much information here. Jesus Christ, there's a lot going on. So wow, this book is like over 35 chapters. Oh, so very interesting. Yeah, this coming back to the weapons of influence. So these help us to understand the different tools, mechanisms that people can be using. To be honest with you, a lot of these I've already heard of. Reciprocity. I knew of that, but I didn't. There are some examples of how they gave to view that I hadn't really seen before. But that one is intuitive. I understand that. Scarcity, yes, of course. Social proof, yes. The liking, it's clear, but I hadn't really explicitly thought about that, but it does make a lot of sense. Authority in general. we have a sense of indifference to authority. So we tend to obey orders. Yeah, that also makes sense. Commitment and consistency was, oh, sorry guys, consistency and commitment was one of the newest. Sorry, I don't say sorry. Sorry for saying sorry. No, no, don't say sorry. Don't apologize, and don't. What was the last one? Don't say sorry. Don't apologize, and don't explain. If you're trying to maintain power, those are the three things you don't want to do. You don't want to apologize. You don't want to say sorry. And you don't want to, sorry, I didn't mean to flick you guys. I wasn't doing that on purpose. You don't want to apologize. You don't want to say sorry. And you don't want to explain. Really, particularly over explaining yourself, because it decreases your power, your authority. And that will cause people to respond to you in ways that you don't like. So this is a really interesting chapter, quite short, quite straight to the rule. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that and gained some knowledge. Take some time to reflect on these things, to see if there's anything new, any of those were new for you. And if so, perhaps dig a bit deeper to gain a better understanding of that. And I'll see you guys the next time. Take care.